Hi there, thanks for joining. In the previous video we've talked about tonal values. What are tonal values and why are they so important in our paintings? And now it's time for some practical exercises. Maybe it's good to first watch the entire video, but after that it's very important that you do this exercise yourself, because doing it yourself is different than watching me do it. In the description of the video you will find a list of materials that you need, and if you follow along and you do it yourself, you'll be amazed about how much it improves your observation of tonal values and your feeling for it. So it's really fun. Here I have a piece of paper that's suited for acrylics, and I'll attach that to a plank with some painter's tape. So, and where's the rest of my tape? I thought I was so well prepared, and like that. Now I grab a palette. And now I want to put grey gesso on top of this paper. And gesso is a good primer for acrylics, makes painting on paper slightly easier, and it provides a coat so that the paint doesn't absorb too much. And also I want to give this paper a middle grey color, and I'll explain why later. But so I grab a little bit of black acrylic paint and I'll add a little bit of gesso on the palette. Then I take a palette knife. It looks like a cooking lesson, but I'll add a slight amount of black paint to the white gesso. Not too much. Always be careful with black paint, because the pigments of black are way stronger than white paint. So if I want to make something middle gray, you cannot say I do 50% of white and 50% of black and then I get middle gray. That's not the way it works with pigments. Now already we start practicing. So I do as if this is my first time that I do this. Now I want to make a middle gray, so I want to make a gray that is in between the black and the white. Is this in between black and white? No, this is very close to white still, you see? So what do I have to do? I add a little bit more black. So it already leans more to the middle than it did previously. Is this color more towards white or more towards black? I would say it's still more towards white. So I'll add more black. And again, this is already what starts your training of the feeling for tonal values, your observation. Now you can see it's going towards the middle of these two colors more, you see? Now it's less close to white and it's closer to black. Is it exactly in the middle? I would say it still can use a little bit of black. And now, what do you think? Now I get the feeling that this gray color, this gray tonal value, gets really close to a color to a tonal value that could lie in between black and white. But still I have the feeling that it could use a little bit more black, because still it is a little bit more towards the white side. So I'll add slightly more black again. I think now we're getting close to a middle value. Of course the black has disappeared now, so I'll add some new black to my palette. Here. This might very well be a tonal value that's in between black and white. Now, it is a little bit difficult, of course, but that's why I put a link to a middle gray card in the description. You can download and print, and you can compare this value to that gray card. And I have a gray palette that's a sort of middle gray, and you see that I'm very close to that tonal value. But I have to say there's one thing that's very difficult with acrylics. Acrylics dry darker than what you see in wet form on your palette. But for this moment I leave it like this, it's good enough. And now it's time to put it on the paper. I'll add a little bit of water as well to make it more fluid. When I put gesso on canvas, I don't add water, I use pure gesso and acrylic paint, but on paper it's easier to dilute it a little bit with water. So a slight amount of water. So like this, it starts running away on my palette, you see? But here we go, like this. Then I get a big brush. You can use a big brush like this, or a spalter, or a house painting brush, but I have an even bigger brush. The bigger, the easier it gets, of course. So, and now I quickly cover my paper with the gesso. So, just load your brush, put it on, and don't mind the strokes too much. It's not that important, but just fill it. And initially, gesso dries really quickly, so it's very quickly dry to the touch. And now you see I've covered everything. Then I do some strokes in one direction like this and some strokes in one direction like this to make it a little bit smooth, but I don't mind too much. And also don't mind if your paper starts buckling, because now we have to let it dry for 24 hours. And while it's drying, the paper will stretch itself again. And if that is not the case, if after 24 hours you still have buckles, then you just reattach your paper with some new tape to the plank. Then it's good to go. And while I clean my brush and palette knife, I will quickly tell you why we need a gray background, of why I wanted that. And that is because we are going to practice with tonal values from the lightest light to the darkest dark. And the problem with a white paper is that I cannot paint white on it. Yes, I can paint white on it, but you won't see it. And the lighter values, you won't see them quite right. But when I make my paper middle gray, I can paint white and light values on it. And I can also paint the dark values. The only value that I cannot paint in this case then is the middle value, so to speak. And but that is why, and that's why it's also not that important that it is exactly middle gray. It's fine if it's in that region, not too dark, not too light, but don't mind if it is a little bit off. That's not a problem at all, because that middle value later on we're gonna mix it with paint as well and put it on then, so you can correct it. That's no problem. It's just that you have something to put light and dark values on, and it was your first exercise to get that feel, and try to do it yourself first before you compare it with that gray card. First try to get a feeling of, is this evenly balanced? Is this a color that is more, a tonal value that's more towards black, or is it more towards white? Look what happens if I would have added a little bit more black. Then you see it starts to feel different already. This tonal value is closer to the black than to the white, you see? That's the game we play. And I still like it. Isn't it beautiful that we as a human, and that we can develop that sense of this is more towards white and this is more towards black. I like that. Good. Leave it to dry for 24 hours, then we can continue. So after 24 hours of drying, we have a nice stretched gray paper. Now let's start the practice. The first thing we do is we draw 3 boxes. Size doesn't matter, but don't do it too big, because you want to use the paper for other things as well. It's our first practice. See, like this maybe. Now in this first row of 3 boxes, I wanted to make 3 tonal values: white, black, and the middle tonal value. So it starts simple. I'll just grab some white. I'll put it in the first box. That's our lightest tonal value. By the way, sometimes your white maybe doesn't cover that well the first time. You can go over it if you like, if it is a little bit more dry. So now I clean the brush and I head over to the black paint. And I put that in the third box. It's the darkest value. Now I clean the brush again. So I wipe out most paint, then I make it moist. Wipe out more paint, moist. Again, a little bit of water until hardly anything comes off anymore, and then I clean the brush. Can you hear? I make extra loud noises so you can hear. I clean the brush in water, but you see there's hardly any polluting of the water because there's hardly any pigment left in the brush if you use the paper towel. Now I want to make the in-between value, the middle gray. So I go looking for that balance again on my palette. And of course, this helps. My gray palette helps and this paper helps, but as well I try to look for myself. So I'll grab a little bit of white with my palette knife, you see, so, and I put it in the middle between these two values over here. And then I grab a little bit of paper towel, clean the palette knife because I want to take some black and I don't want to pollute the black paint, of course. So I grab a little bit of black and I'll start carefully. And you see, it of course gets darker. And again, it's the search for the balance. Is this more towards white or is it more towards black or is it in between? I would say, just by looking at it, that it's more towards white still, so it needs a little bit more of black. So the excess paint I wipe off with my palette knife, then clean it with the paper towel and add a little bit more black. But be careful, again, black is a very strong pigment, much stronger than white. And you see, now we get close to a kind of a middle value, I think. If I compare it with this and with this, it feels more towards the white side and a little bit less towards the black side. So again, I wipe it off, slightly more black still. Try to make it a nice even mixture as well. You see, it gets closer to the value of my palette as well, but I'll show you this like it's the first time I do this. That's my purpose, this the purpose of this video, because after a while you get to the desired result easier and faster because you get a feeling for it. But now I'll build it slowly to show you. If I compare now, I think this might be a middle value. And but of course, if you've added too much black paint, then you solve it by adding more white again. That's logical, I think. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell, but try to keep spaces here in between. Then I grab that next tonal value, that middle tonal value, and I'll add it here. It's slightly darker than my paper. Now we're gonna do the same, but with 5 steps. So we get more. So 1, 2, 3, and 1 at this side extra, and 1 at this side extra. So, you see, 5 values. The same process that we did by finding this middle value between white and black, we're gonna do to find a value between white and middle gray and black and middle gray. So we get an extra value here and an extra value in between here. But first, let us put the lightest value on the canvas or on the paper. There you go. Clean the brush thoroughly. Again, wipe off excess paint. Make it moist. Make it moist and wipe off. Make it moist, wipe off. Clean enough and make it dry, and then head over to the black paint. There we are. Same process. Wipe off excess paint till nothing comes off, then make it moist and make it dry. It doesn't matter where you start, but I want to do the dark value between this one and this one. And of course you can take a little bit of this and mix it with black, but I don't have that much paint on my palette, so I'll just start totally new. I'll add some white here in between, and I'll add some black to it. And I just start building again. But now, of course, we're gonna need more black relatively than we did here. Now this value is, is it lighter or darker than this one? It's very close. So when you practice more, you get faster to the tonal value that you want. I did it on accident this time, but now I'm gonna add more black paint to make it darker than this middle value and more to that value. It's the same story as what we did before. And now we're gonna try to feel and to see is this already a tonal value that is in between these two, or is it still too light? What do you think? I think it's too light. You see, it's close to this, it's not close to that. So there we go, more black. And look at this. What do you think now? It's far from this tonal value and is relatively close to this one, I think. And so try to think for yourself what you see. Because I make errors myself too, of course. But I think it needs slightly more white. That it is a little bit too dark. Okay, I compare with this. It's fairly dark compared to this, and to this it's still a little bit close, I think. So still I'll add a little bit more white, but we're getting closer. See what happens now? Now I think it's more evenly balanced. Way darker than this and also lighter than this. This is in between, I think. Oh, I've forgotten to paint the middle value. I'll do that shortly. Here we go. Now I'll take that lighter value, that middle value, and I'll put it here. See, this is fun, isn't it? We are gonna do the same process, but now we make a value between the middle gray and the white. So I grab a little bit of black, because I don't need much black in this case. And more white. Now we have a value that's reasonably close to this value and far away from the white, so it needs more white. That's instantly clear to see, I think. So there we go, more white, and start paint. So, isn't that great? Doesn't it looks so simple, but it is quite difficult. And that's why it's important that you do it yourself, because then you experience the difficulty of this, but also, yeah, you develop that sense. Now I make them slightly bigger this time. The last step is we make a tonal value scale of 9 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the idea is still the same. You have these colors on your palette. First, let us do the colors that we already have. Most simple, white. Then I grab that second value, skip one and put that second value over here, because again, shortly we have to mix an extra value in between these two. Then we take the middle value. Now that's simple, is in the middle. You see almost the same color as the paper again. Wipe the brush clean, head over to this value that's in between black and the middle value. So skip one box, clean the brush and put in the darkest dark. So now you can guess how we progress. We do a value in between these, here a value in between these two, and value in between these two, and a value in between these two. Now of course, if you are busy painting, then you take it the easy way. You take a little bit of white and you add that to this value and you make it slightly lighter. But you see, I don't have that much paint left on my palette, so maybe I need to make new, I don't know. Well, let me try. Like this. Add a little bit of gray. It's easier to make it darker with a little bit of gray in this case, because when I add black, it immediately gets way more black. But you see, this might be something of an in-between value between these two. Maybe it needs a little bit more light. You see, let's compare. Yeah, that's nice. That's in between these two values, so that I'll add that to the canvas, or paper in this case. So you see, lighter than the white and darker than the white and lighter than the third value. Now we do the same for these two, so I can mix them a little bit together, and then I get an in-between value of that. But you could also say, of course, I make it from scratch. I take some white paint, and again I'll add some gray paint. Compare, I think, oh, this is a little bit too close to that one, so it needs a little bit more dark. Compare again. Now it gets close to this one, and it's a little bit off of that one, still slightly darker. There we go. So here you are. A value in between this one and that one. And so we continue. I make a value in between this one and this one. So I mix these two together. Load the brush. Darker than the middle gray, lighter than that gray. And so we continue. Let's go to the last one, the black. I make a value in between the black and that dark color that we already had. Compare, yes, and brush it in. And there you have it. And look how beautiful that looks. Don't be mad at yourself if this doesn't work the first time, because it's more difficult than it looks when you do it yourself. It isn't that easy. And that's normal. So maybe you mess up and these colors are all a little bit too much the same, or that kind of stuff. No problem, just try again and again and again. Practice this several times because it will benefit you a lot. And after that I've got another nice exercise and I've made a blog about that. The link I will put in the description, and in that blog you see step by step how you can practice to paint from dark to light. And it's with a Greek statue, a head of a Greek statue. And don't be overwhelmed by the look of that portrait, because I've got an easy trick to put the sketch on the paper, so it's more or less tracing, and so that you can focus after that on working with tonal values. And I'll show in the blog step by step how you can do that. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. It's just like making color wheels. I still enjoy that as well. It is always nice and beautiful in a way to make these things. Oh, I completely forgot to tell. If you have made a good grayscale that you're satisfied with, then just cut it out, and you have made your own grayscale that you can use to compare with your subject, so that you can check how dark or light is something compared to my grayscale. And that gives you an indication of how dark or light something is. Thanks for watching, see you next time.